Climate protesters from Extinction Rebellion have entered the London airport and have created disruption. Several people have been arrested as dozens of demonstrators staged a sit-down protest at the entrance to the London City Airport. Protesters chanted, "Fly today, gone tomorrow," as they sat at the exit of the airport's railway station. The police picked up protesters and carried them away, but some had glued themselves to the floor and to each other. A climate change activist climbed onto the roof of the city airport. The man then hung a banner above the airport entrance that read, "Our fragile planet is dying." He was later seen pulling up a second protester who stood alongside him on the airport's roof, chanting slogans.
Thank you.
Earlier, the Extinction Rebellion movement targeted government buildings and glued themselves to block the roads and bridges. Our correspondent Ollie Bharat now joins us live from London with the latest. Ollie, we are on day 4 of what is a 2-week-long protest, and the airport has been brought to a halt already.
I wouldn't say the airport's been brought to a halt at all. In fact, London City Airport insists it's running pretty well and that most flights have been coming and going as planned. It is true to say that there has been some significant disruption for passengers at the airport. For many of them, it's been slightly more complicated to enter the building than would usually be the case. There are significant restrictions in place on entering the terminal at London City Airport. You cannot get through the main front doors in the way that you would normally be able to unless you show at a slightly temporary entrance your boarding pass and your passport as well. So general members of the public not able to access the building in the way that they would normally be able to if they were, for example, dropping off relatives or sending people on their way. That said, some protesters have managed to get in. There have been protests continuing in and around, therefore, parts of the airport, and we have seen one protester manage to get onto a flight. That appears to have been a person who did have a ticket, but then when the plane was about to take off, we saw him standing up and protesting in front of the fellow passengers with which he was on board the plane. He was removed from that flight. It taxied back around towards the runway and went on its way. So some significant disruption, but London City Airport insists it is very much open for business.
London City Airport is very much open for business. The word coming in from Ollie Bharat. Ollie, I was asking that because we've seen what the Extinction Rebellion protests can do to the City of London. Last time they staged protests in April, parts of central London came to a standstill because of those protests. And this time around, they're out with full vigour. We've still got a whole 10 more days to go, roughly. So things in London in terms of climate protests are only set to go up.
They're certainly set to continue. Whether they will go up remains to be seen. We have seen some work being carried out today, Thursday, by Metropolitan Police in the centre of the British capital to clear some of the roads around Westminster that had been previously blocked by protesters. There are still a lot of protesters on the ground, and they're also moving around the city over the course of this 2-week period with various different targets. London City Airport today, but we've also seen government ministries being targeted by snap protests as well. We expect the City of London to be targeted, the financial district at times as well. These protests are causing significant disruption to the daily lives of many Londoners, be they commuters, be they businesses, be they haulage firms or taxi drivers. It is certainly having a major impact on the way that Londoners and people visiting London are able to get around the British capital. And it's causing a huge deployment of police officers as well. A lot of leave has been cancelled. Many representatives of the police saying that they are being forced to concentrate a huge amount of resources on policing these protests, but they are responding more robustly than we saw back in April. And that clearing of roads around Westminster today of protests certainly, I think, represents that.
Right. Ollie, even as authorities do all they can to deal with these protests, the bigger question is the fact that, what is the response to the question being asked over here? Not enough is being done today to cut carbon emissions. There is still no clear answers to that. And do you think that when you stage protests over a staggered period of time, like 2 weeks, government authorities will take it far more seriously than before in terms of actual work on the ground to combat climate change?
I have to say there is very little evidence at all at this point of the current UK government making any significant moves as a result of the protests that are currently underway. Now, the government insists that actually it already has some of the most ambitious targets on earth to try and bring carbon emissions down to net zero. Now, Extinction Rebellion activists would say those targets aren't good enough, they aren't strong enough, and that carbon emissions need to be down to net zero within 5 years or so. So that's provoked a huge amount of debate here in the UK about whether these protesters are using the right tactics and whether public sympathy for these protests, if there is any, will continue, because much of the public is saying, look, we agree with the general message that more needs to be done, but we're not sure we agree with the tactics, and we're not sure we agree with some of the aims. To bring carbon emissions down to net zero by 2025 would mean a huge impact on the global economy in terms of flights being grounded, huge changes to people's lives. So, as I say, in quarters there is real sympathy with the broad message of these protests, which is to do more to fight climate change and do more to protect the environment. It's slightly less clear about public sympathy when it comes to the specific aims that Extinction Rebellion have in their manifesto.
Ollie Barrett joining us from London for the latest on the climate protests that are causing disruptions in the city. Thank you, Ollie, for being with us here on WION Dispatch.